Right now, there are people walking free who have killed before and never paid for it. Not suspects, not persons of interest. Killers who slipped through the system returned to normal life and were never stopped. Some were never caught. Some were caught and released. And some may still be killing today. This isn't speculation. It's documented reality. According to the FBI, there may be as many as 50 active serial killers operating in the United States at any given time. On the loose doesn't mean running or hiding. It means blending in. It means going to work, buying groceries, sitting in traffic, living an ordinary life after doing something unforgivable. Serial killers don't disappear. They adapt. They learn when to stop, when to move, when to wait. And when the attention fades, they survive. Cases don't go cold because the truth vanishes. They go cold because the system stops connecting the dots. This video isn't about shock value. It's about unfinished crimes, unfinished investigations, and unfinished justice. Because the most dangerous killers aren't the ones on wanted posters. They're the ones no one is actively looking for anymore. And some of them are still out there. If you want to understand how killers stay free, you don't start with a face. You start with a place. Along Interstate 45 between Houston and Galveston, there's a stretch of land locals learned to fear decades ago. Not because it looks dangerous, but because it doesn't. A flat, overgrown patch near League City, roughly 25 acres, bordered by refineries on one side and highway traffic on the other. Close enough to civilization to feel safe. Isolated enough for no one to hear you scream. Since the 1970s, more than 30 bodies have been found here. Mostly young women, some barely teenagers. Dumped, scattered, forgotten. The pattern isn't one killer's signature. It's something worse. Multiple killers using the same ground over decades because the geography makes it easy. Easy to abduct, easy to dump, easy to disappear. Victims vanished from gas stations, payphones, short walks home. Ordinary moments that turned fatal in seconds. And while a handful of men were eventually convicted for individual murders, most of the bodies found here still have no name attached to the person who put them there. That's the part people miss. The Texas killing fields isn't a cold case. It's a shared crime scene. A location so perfectly designed for violence that law enforcement quietly admitted what no one wants to hear. This was the ideal place to kill someone and get away with it. And for decades, many did. This wasn't a killing ground like Texas. This was a hunter with patience. Between the late 1960s and the mid-1980s, a pattern emerged in the countryside surrounding Florence. Couples began dying in places designed for privacy, dirt roads, vineyards, wooded pull-offs, where young lovers parked to talk, kiss, and feel alone. They were never alone. The attacks followed a ritual. The killer waited until the couple was inside the car, distracted, vulnerable. Then he approached quietly and fired a .22 caliber pistol through the window. No warning, no struggle. Both victims were executed at close range. And then, instead of fleeing, the killer stayed. That's what separated this case from almost anything else Europe had seen. After the murders, the killer mutilated the female victim with a knife, removing specific body parts in a way that suggested control, fixation, and experience. He didn't rush. He didn't destroy the scene. He took what he came for and vanished. 8 couples were killed. 16 victims. Over nearly 20 years. Same weapon. Same pattern. Same locations. Most murders happened on Saturdays. Many occurred during a new moon when visibility was at its lowest. This wasn't chance. It was scheduling. Law enforcement knew they were dealing with someone methodical, someone who understood police response times, someone who knew how to wait, and worst of all, someone who enjoyed the attention. In 1985, the killer mailed a letter directly to prosecutors. Inside was physical evidence taken from one of the victims, a deliberate taunt. Proof that he was still in control. After that, the murders stopped. What followed was chaos disguised as investigation. Suspects were arrested. One man was convicted only for the case to collapse when it was discovered police had planted evidence at his home. Before he could be retried, he died. Two alleged accomplices were convicted for only some of the murders, leaving half the killings legally unexplained. No theory accounted for every crime scene. No suspect matched the full behavioral profile. Some believed the killer acted alone. Others believed there were multiple killers or even a cult operating under a single ritual. The most unsettling theory was also the simplest. The real killer was never on law enforcement's radar at all. Someone quiet. Someone local. Someone who blended in perfectly. The monster of Florence didn't disappear because he was caught. He disappeared because he chose to stop. And when a killer like that stops voluntarily, the danger doesn't vanish with him. It just goes dormant. If the Texas killing fields exposed geography and Florence exposed investigative failure, then this case exposes something far worse, a justice system that simply let a monster walk away. His name is Pedro Lopez, known to the world as the Monster of the Andes. Between the late 1970s and 1980, Lopez admitted to killing more than 100 young girls across Colombia, Ecuador, and Peru. Some estimates place the number closer to 300. Most of his victims were children from impoverished or indigenous communities, girls whose disappearances barely registered, whose identities were difficult to trace, and whose deaths were easy to ignore. What makes this case unbearable isn't just the scale. It's how preventable it was. Lopez was violent long before his spree began. He committed his first killings while already in prison, murdering 4 inmates with a makeshift knife. He was released anyway. Later, he was captured by villagers in Peru while attempting to abduct a child. They tried to execute him themselves. An American missionary intervened and handed him over to authorities. The police didn't arrest him. They banned him from the country. He crossed the border and kept killing. When Lopez was finally arrested in Ecuador, he confessed. He led police to dozens of burial sites. 53 bodies were recovered. Even then, the system failed. Despite admitting to hundreds of murders, he was charged with only a fraction, convicted of just 3, sentenced to 16 years, the maximum allowed at the time. He served 14. After his release, he was committed to a psychiatric hospital for 4 years. Then in 1998, he was released again. No monitoring, no tracking, no public warning. By 1999, Pedro Lopez vanished completely. To this day, no one knows where he is. Legally, he paid his debt. Morally, the damage is irreversible. A man who confessed to killing children at a rate approaching 1 per week walked free because the law wasn't built to stop someone like him. The monster of the Andes wasn't clever. He wasn't hidden. He wasn't unstoppable. He was allowed. Up to this point, every case had a beginning, a pattern, and eventually an end, even if that end was unjust. This next category is different. These are not stories with conclusions. These are situations still unfolding where the evidence is incomplete, the facts are disputed, and the danger may still be present. In Houston, more than 24 bodies were pulled from bayous in a single year. Many were found in or around Buffalo Bayou. The similarities were impossible to ignore. Bodies in water, minimal trauma, deaths initially ruled accidental. Online, the name Buffalo Bayou Killer began circulating almost immediately. Police rejected the label. They pointed to inconsistent victim profiles, varying causes of death, and toxicology reports suggesting overdoses or drowning without violence. From an investigative standpoint, they weren't wrong. Serial killers usually leave patterns. This didn't look like one. But families noticed something else. Delayed reports, limited transparency, case files still marked pending. And for people who live near the water, the fear didn't come from certainty, it came from not knowing. That uncertainty is the defining feature of modern true crime. Today's killers don't need elaborate rituals or signatures. They only need environments where death can plausibly look accidental. Waterways. High-risk nightlife areas. places where intoxication and isolation overlap. And Houston isn't alone. Across the world, similar theories have surfaced, clusters of deaths dismissed individually but unsettling when viewed together. Authorities often warn against connecting dots too early. They're right, but history shows that ignoring patterns for too long has consequences. This chapter isn't an accusation. It's a warning. Because when cases are unresolved in real time, the question isn't whether a killer exists. It's whether we'll recognize them before they stop. Some killers don't become famous because they never leave a dramatic trail. No letters, no manifestos, no spectacle. Just bodies and silence. That's why the case known as the Sleepy Hollow Killer remains largely unknown outside Pietermaritzburg, despite over a decade of consistent violence. From the late 1990s through 2007, women began turning up dead near the N3 highway. Most were sex workers. All had been assaulted and strangled using their own underwear. Same method, same disposal areas, same victim profile. Police suspected a serial offender early on, but progress stalled. Evidence was thin. Witnesses were scarce, and the victims came from communities with little visibility or protection. Then the killings stopped until they didn't. In 2007, nearly a decade later, 3 more women were found in the same region killed in the same way. One disturbing difference stood out: their bodies had been burned. Escalation, not imitation. Yet despite renewed investigations, no arrests were made, no convictions, no confirmed suspect. To this day, authorities cannot say with certainty whether the killer is dead dormant or still watching. And then there's a case many law enforcement agencies refuse to call a case at all. In Manchester, dozens of people have died in canals over the past 2 decades. Young men, often intoxicated, often alone. Officially, most deaths are ruled accidental drownings. Unofficially, a name began circulating: the Manchester Pusher. Police reject it completely. They argue there's no consistent evidence of foul play, and statistically, canals near nightlife districts are dangerous places. And they may be right, but one confirmed incident complicates everything. In 2018, a cyclist was deliberately pushed into a canal by an unknown attacker who continued kicking him back into the water as he tried to escape. The victim survived. The attacker was never found. One proven attack doesn't confirm a serial killer, but it proves something else: pushing someone into water can be murder and look like an accident. And that's the danger. Not every pattern announces itself loudly. Some hide behind statistics, assumptions, and the comfort of explanations we want to believe. Every story you've heard tonight shares the same ending: not resolution, but absence. No final arrest, no courtroom closure, just silence. And silence is where danger lives longest. Serial killers don't thrive because they're brilliant. Most don't. They thrive because systems fail slowly. Because investigations lose funding, because cases become paperwork, because victims come from places society doesn't rush to defend. When attention fades, killers don't need to hide, they only need to wait. We like to believe violence announces itself clearly, that evil looks obvious, that patterns are easy to spot in real time. History proves the opposite. Most killers aren't stopped by instinct or intuition. They're stopped by persistence, the kind that doesn't expire when headlines do. And when that persistence disappears, something else happens. The definition of justice quietly shifts. Unsolved becomes inactive. Inactive becomes forgotten. And forgotten cases don't protect anyone. This isn't about panic. It's about awareness. About understanding that the most dangerous phase of a crime isn't the moment it happens, it's the moment people stop asking questions. Because every case that went cold once looked isolated. Every pattern was once dismissed as coincidence. The killers you've heard about weren't monsters because they were unstoppable. They were monsters because they were allowed room to operate. And the uncomfortable truth is this: the line between past and present crime is thinner than we want to admit. Some threats don't end. They just age quietly. So if there's one lesson worth holding on to, it's this: justice doesn't fail all at once. It fails when we decide it's finished. And some stories are only finished because no one is still looking. This isn't a story meant to scare you. It's a warning meant to stay with you. Every case you've heard today shares one uncomfortable truth. Danger doesn't always come from the shadows. Sometimes it comes from systems that stop paying attention, from investigations that stall, from victims society quietly decides are easier to forget. Serial killers don't survive because they're smarter than everyone else. They survive because time works in their favor. Evidence degrades. Witnesses move on. Budgets disappear. Headlines change. And when the noise fades, accountability fades with it. We like clean endings, arrests, trials, sentences. But real life doesn't offer that comfort. Some crimes never close. Some killers never face a courtroom. And some threats don't announce when they're gone, they simply blend back into normal life. That doesn't mean we panic. It means we stay aware. It means we question patterns instead of dismissing them as coincidence. It means we remember that justice isn't a moment. It's a process that only works when people refuse to look away. Because history shows us something clear. The most dangerous time isn't when crimes are happening loudly. It's when they're happening quietly. If you're watching this, you're already doing the most important thing: paying attention. Sharing these stories keeps them alive. It keeps pressure on systems that would rather move on. And sometimes attention is the only thing standing between silence and accountability. If you believe these stories matter, take a second to like this video. Share it with someone who cares about truth, not just entertainment. And if you want more documentaries that dig past headlines and into the uncomfortable reality behind true crime, subscribe to the channel. Because some stories don't end on their own. They end when people refuse to forget.